Well, I bet you never thought you'd be watching a video about glues and jigs, but yes, you are. So this is fun. Glues are something that are used a lot with woods because there's a lot of different types that you can use with timbers. The most common one is this one here. Well, it doesn't always come in that pot, but it's like, yeah, it's basically called wood glue. And yeah, even then you might think, what's wood glue? I've never used it. And actually, you probably have because it's just PVA glue and it's stuff that you'd have used when you're in primary school. And the reason being is because it's safe, it's water based, it's washable. Yeah, and it actually is very effective, especially at gluing timbers and generally sort of fibrous materials like paper. Yeah, and because you can wash it off your hands and it's non-toxic, it's kind of safe for anyone to use. You don't need to wear gloves to use it. You don't need to wear like a face mask to use it. It's great. It's just super messy when you're working with it. It's like horrifically messy. If you watch the video on laminating, which you should have done, you'll see there when they're doing the laminating, it's like it's really messy. They have to like wipe everything down and everything gets sticky, and you have to basically, when you're doing big bits of timber, you need to put some like protective sheet down on the table because otherwise it just goes everywhere. And before you know it, you're sticking yourself onto everything, and yeah, it just gets horrible. But at least it's water washable. So yeah, that is all about PVA. Now, sometimes PVA is not appropriate as a choice of glue. Say if you're making a kitchen product out of timber, so let's go classic DT. Let's say a chopping board, right? And to make your chopping board, you've got two lovely bits of oak that you want to glue together, which you're then going to cut out into a chopping board shape. Yeah, if you use wood glue or PVA, the problem would be obviously as soon as someone washed it on the tap, if you like were chopping something and then you wash it, that glue holding the joints together will actually eventually dissolve and the board will just break apart. Even worse, if you used it on a boat and all the bits of wood on the boat were, held together by PVA glue, then that's no good either. A bit like, and same with the surfboards and stuff. It's be bad news. Also, it takes quite a long time to set. Like you want to leave it really for at least 12 hours to set properly, like to fully set rigid. It's quite a slow drying adhesive. It's partly because the water in it needs to evaporate and stuff. So yes. Okay. Now the other ones we've got on here are a lot more potent, let's say, a bit scarier. This one here, contact adhesive, this is great because it's flexible and it sets, even when it's set, it's still flexible. So it's great for joining things together that are like elastomers and rubbers. So it's used on things like shoes a lot. Yeah, and it's great for working with leather if you're trying to stick two pieces of leather together, like you might do with shoes. Because it can bend, it can't really ever be pulled apart. Well, it can be with a lot of force, but it's not going to accidentally just start peeling apart of its own accord. It's quite interesting because you have to let it almost dry completely first before you stick the two pieces together. You have to put the glue down on the two pieces of work separately, spread it out, and then leave it to dry, and to the point where literally when you touch it, it feels dry. Then when you put them together, it'll almost bond instantly. Then you have a really strong bond. Then UV hardening adhesives. This is also known as super glue. These are, well, yeah, these are good because they're kind of used for anything really. And they use ultraviolet to cure, to set. So you can actually use these pretty much on any material. You can join metals with them. You can, this one example here is being used with glass, and the good thing is because it's set basically transparent, it can glue glass together and you won't even really notice it. It's nasty stuff though. This, you want to be wearing latex gloves, and you don't want to be inhaling the fumes. So you need to be using it in a well ventilated area. Same with contact adhesive really as well. Yeah, think of it this way. These gradually, the reason they go green, orange, red is because green is safe, orange is it's kind of okay, red is like not very safe. So that's UV hardening adhesive. It's nasty. It comes in little bottles, little pipette bottle, and it's very, very, very toxic. You would not want to drink it, get in your eyes, even it will stick your skin together as well, and that's why you have to wear gloves when you're working with it. Okay, so then carrying on this jolly conversation, we're going to move on to solvent cement. Now, solvent cement, a lot of you will have already used in the form of, sometimes we call it tensile cement or acrylic cement, whatever. It's basically a solvent that can be used on plastics particularly. So it works really well on acrylic. And that's because when you have two pieces of acrylic joined together, you put a brush of solvent cement down the edge. And what that does, capillary action then draws the solvent into the gap between the two pieces. And then what it does is there's actually a chemical reaction between the acrylic and the solvent cement. It actually causes the very top layer of the acrylic on both pieces to melt. And then they basically melt and then bond to each other like that. So essentially, if you've got a very good covering of solvent cement, it will bond something so strongly to the point where it's basically, you can't, especially with acrylic, you can't take it apart again. It's set like concrete. So it evaporates really quickly. So if you're putting it on your work, it'll just, because its boiling point is so low, it evaporates it starts evaporating immediately. If you brush it onto your work, you'll see it immediately start to evaporate. So you have to work very quickly with it. It's really nasty. Like, again, you don't want to get it in your eyes. You want to breathe it in. You don't, because it's a solvent, obviously, and you want to wear gloves when you're working with it as well. And epoxy resin is the last one here. This is like the Araldite is a brand, but it's essentially epoxy resin. Now, you saw it being used on the surfboard by the surfboard maker earlier. Now, sometimes epoxy resin is used as a coating because it's very durable and it can set completely transparent. So, and it has this lovely glossy finish. And so for, say, boats, which is perfect application for this stuff, it's completely watertight. It's very durable. It'll get right into any cracks and gaps. And I mean, anything resin based like this, it makes for a beautiful finish if that's what you want it for. You can even add color to it. Like there's actually sometimes see resin. I'm going to get an image for you. Poor table. Yeah, I think these look awesome. In fact, I've been desperate to try and make one of these. So what some guys that make, or they craftsmen, sometimes they do resin pours that are like this. So if they've got two pieces of timber that don't match and they've got a gap, they mix up some resin with some dyes and stuff. And this is basically just epoxy resin that they then pour in with a hardener, and then it will harden, and then it gets completely flush to the surface of the timber there, and it basically fills the gap. And yeah, in my opinion, it looks really cool. But yeah. So epoxy resin will literally join anything. A bit like super glue, it will join multi-material. So like paper to metal, glass to plastic, whatever. It's like a sort of cross-family bonding agent. Whereas a lot of adhesives will only glue the same material to itself. Okay. The last one is very quick, jigs. So jigs are all about how can we make sure that we drill or cut something in exactly the same place every single time. So I've got the examples on here of like, we've got examples on here of like a router. So we looked at a router earlier, but if say you want to get the same shape every time, you can have a pivot, you can attach the router to it. So when you move the router around, it will always go in the same path every time. With a drill, you might have a board set up like this, where when you clamp the material that you're drilling in place, it will always drill in the same place, respectively, on each piece that you're drilling. You can see here with the disc sander, you can set up the fence here to act like a jig, so you always get a 45-degree angle, for example. So jigs are great for repeatability. I mean, I even set up one here for a little AirPods case I was making, where I wanted to get the same cut line around the top. So I thought to myself, right, well, once I've made the AirPods case, I want to 3D print a little shell for this, and then that can fit right in there. Then I can cut around, and I can also do the little slots there for the lid, so the lid can flex like that. That is an example of a jig, because if I had to make 15, 20 of those, it would be a lot quicker for me to use a jig, and then I don't even have to measure it out. I can just get the knife and cut around the top, then it's done. So jigs are all about making your life quicker and easier and enabling repeatability in manufacture. So it can help people move from like one-off production to doing then batch production. That's what it basically enables you to do. Okay, well done. You survived 2.8. If you did make it all the way to the end, you can then do the practice questions. So well done.